Hello everybody and welcome back to Screen Stars. Welcome to another of my top 10 lists. Happy Halloween everybody. I thought this year to celebrate Halloween I would do a top 10 list of my favourite horror films from the 1970s. A decade that influenced horror filmmakers for decades to come, and some of the best horror films ever made have come from the 1970s. So this list celebrates those. As with any list, they are subjective. These are the horror films from the 1970s that mean the most to me, the ones that I tend to watch the most regular. Most of these on this list I still watch very, very often these days. But I would love to know in the comments what your favourite horror films from the 1970s are, and please give me some suggestions for some more top 10 lists for the future. So happy Halloween everybody. I hope you enjoy the list, and thank you very much for watching. So coming in at number 10 on my list is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is a film that was released in 1974. This would probably be a lot higher on a lot of people's lists. However, I'm not a huge fan of slasher films in general, and I actually find this film, even though it's a classic film for sure, I find it actually quite difficult to watch because it's so it's so brutal and tough to watch, but it doesn't mean that it's not a fantastic horror film. It clearly is, and it's clearly one of the most influential horror films ever made, and bloody scary at times too. So yeah, it definitely deserves to be on this list, that's for sure. Coming in at number 9, the Amityville Horror. This was released in 1979. It starred James Brolin, Margot Kidder and Rod Steiger, and it had quite a healthy box office return at the time, and it has spawned countless Amityville films, countless of Amityville cheap knockoff films, to the point where it's kind of, in a lot of people's eyes, kind of ruined the original. But however, the original is a very, very good, well-made horror film that is very, very effective to this day. They did a sequel in the mid-noughties, about 2005, with Ryan Reynolds that got a lot of flack, but in actual fact I think it's quite good. Not as good as the original, obviously, but still very good nonetheless. Coming in at number 8, released in 1978, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake of the original, I think, that came out in the 50s, I think. This is the one that starred Leonard Nimoy, Donald Sutherland. It was brilliant. This is one of those films that I watched a lot as a child, and it bloody scared me. It really, really did. I think Jeff Goldblum's in this as well. And that final scene at the end where Donald Sutherland opened his mouth and lets out that guttural screech haunted me for weeks after watching this film for the first time. In my opinion, this is easily the best example of this film that's ever been put to screen, and it is remade quite a lot in a few different ways, but I just love it. Coming in at number 7, Dawn of the Dead, released in 1979, and it was the second of the George A. Romero zombie films. He did Night of the Living Dead, and then he followed it up some years later with this, Dawn of the Dead. Many regard this as his best zombie film. It was successfully remade by Zack Snyder. I'm not sure when it was, mid-noughties again, something like that. And that was a pretty good film as well, but it wasn't as good as the original. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of zombie films in general, but I think this is easily one of the best out there. Hugely influential to many, many filmmakers, and it's just bloody good. Very, very gory too. Coming in at number 6, The Omen, released in 1976, had a pretty healthy box office return and spawned 2 sequels, as well as a remake that was made a few years ago that I did review on the channel actually. Now, The Omen is another one of those that I watched quite a lot when I was young. I probably shouldn't have watched it, but I remember watching it on TV, and it was just terrifying. I remember watching all 3 of them, and I remember probably enjoying the second and third ones more when I was young, but I appreciate this one more now, and it is easily the best film in the series. It's very shocking, it's pretty scary, and definitely deserving to be on this list. Coming in at number 5, Salem's Lot, released in 1979. Now this is a little bit of a cheat because It wasn't released in the cinema, I think, in America. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly sure it was a mini-series. But but I think it was released, edited down and released in cinemas in other places in the world, maybe even Europe. It's irrelevant to me anyway, because the first time I saw this was on TV screens, and it absolutely scared me to death as a youngster. That scene with the tapping on the window of the vampire to get in, truly, truly terrifying. I really love this. I think it's crying out for a remake. They did to make it into a mini-series that was pretty good too. Now, some may contest and say this isn't a horror film. I beg to differ, and I'm putting it at number 4 on my list. Jaws, released in 1975. Box office smash is an understatement for this film, and for me, it's just horror. Even though when you look at the rating, and it's not. I don't even think it's listed as a horror on IMDb, but it is. It's easily one of the best horror films ever made. Steven Spielberg is an absolute genius in regards to putting his scares in films like this, and this film affected me so much as a child, as it did many other people. Absolute classic, one of the greatest films of all time in my opinion, and it's on my list, so deal with it. Coming in at number 3, released in 1978, Halloween. At the time, I think it was the most successful independent film ever made, and it was for a long time. It was made on, I don't know how much it was, something like $30,000, maybe a little bit more, and it brought back millions at the box office and cemented John Carpenter's place as a horror icon. Hugely influential. There's been a string of sequels. We got the Halloween film last year, and they're making another one, so its impact is still felt today, but many still feel that this is the greatest certainly slasher film of all time, and it would be hard to argue with that for sure. Coming in at number 2, Alien, released in 1979. It was a box office hit, and the sequels are all there for everyone to see. Certainly Aliens is an incredible sequel, and the quality fell away after that, but Alien is a full-on horror film, whereas Aliens is more action horror. The first Alien was terrifying to me. Again, it was one of those I watched as a young child, and all I can remember is when I was young I wouldn't eat eggs for months after watching Alien. It put me off eggs for a long time when I was young. Don't know why, but absolutely terrified me. It's one of those I sneaked and watched when I was young, and I probably shouldn't have done, but it was just so good. And coming in at number 1, I don't really see how it can't be number 1. Has to be The Exorcist. Again, an absolute sensation at the box office, released in 1973. It still stands up today. If you put Exorcist on and you've never seen it before, you're going to get scared. It's as simple as that. It's expertly made, terrifying, incredible performances by everybody, including Linda Blair, and it just terrifies you. My mother tells stories of watching this at the cinema and then going home, and there was a power cut, which, as there were many of those in the 70s in the UK, and it scarred her. She won't go near this film after that night, but for me it's just absolutely incredible. So there you go guys, that is my top 10 1970s horror films. I think we can agree that every single one of those films on that list is iconic in some way. Very, very influential, has inspired many a filmmaker for many decades to come, and every single one of them in its own way still stands up today and is very, very watchable, which says a lot for a film from that era. So yeah, I hope you're all having a great Halloween. Please leave me some comments. I'd love to know your thoughts on what your favourite horror films from the 1970s are, and what your experiences or what you remember of watching them for the first time. Many of these films I watched as a youngster, probably sneaking and watching them when I shouldn't have done, as we've all done as children, and they've all impacted me in different ways. So I'd love to hear your stories on that. Thanks for watching everybody. I hope you're having a brilliant Halloween, and I'll see you next time, of course, for more reviews on Screen Stars.